Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this afternoon. Welcome to Stop, Drop, and Roll Forward, Put Out Cash Flow Fires with FCCS, our second webinar in a multi-part series about Oracle FCCS. We're looking forward to walking you through how the balance sheet rolls in FCCS out of the box and helping you understand how FCCS seamlessly enables both year-to-date and periodic cash flow. Today's presenters will give you a deeper look into our topics as they introduce themselves and throughout the webinar as well. And first, I'll give you a little bit of background on our presenters. Andrew Fahey is one of our senior solutions leads. Leveraging his industry expertise and technical acumen, Andrew has led large-scale projects for both global organizations and mid-market organizations across the consolidation, forecasting and planning, data integration, and analytics functions at Platform Specialist. Andrew is also our hero of the day, not letting a canceled flight and travel mayhem stopping him from delivering the webinar for us this afternoon. Will Stewis is a CPA with experience at both EY and KPMG, who can dive deep into the nuts and bolts of how companies report financial data. If you're looking to talk debits and credits, technology, or 90s sitcoms, specifically Seinfeld, look no further than Will. I'm Molly Mackler, and I'm our Director of Client Success. I'm here to point you in the right direction as your point of contact for any and all things related to our resources and expertise here at Platform. And I'm from the Northeast originally, but happen to be based out of the Raleigh-Durham area with this crazy week of weather in the Northeast. We're glad to see some of our clients joining the webinar today and excited to welcome the new names and faces as well. We'd like to briefly introduce our firm to all those new faces and refresh our current clients on all that we can offer as well. Platform Specialists in a nutshell, we pride ourselves on being a group of straight shooters who serve our clients first. We partner with the leading EPM technologies in the space, and today we'll be focusing on Oracle FCCS. Our goal is to tailor the best fit of our solutions, services, and technologies for your specific business needs. And a key differentiator that we bring to the table as a firm is that each of our consultants thoroughly understands both technical and functional components of the business challenges that our clients face, and we can really bridge that gap between the functional and technical side of the house. That gives our firm the ability to take a holistic approach to serving our clients efficiently and effectively. We've implemented hundreds of solutions within the EPM space, and we're based on the East Coast, although we serve clients across the US as well as internationally. Platform Specialist has supported clients across virtually all major industries, and we're able to speak your language in order to help solve industry-specific business problems. We'll be focusing on cash flow and FCCS today, but also helping clients with financial planning, budgeting, consolidation and close, reporting, and business analysis, as well as systems integration. Okay, enough about us. I'll pass it over to Andrew Fahey to get us started.
Great, thanks, Molly. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. All right. Oops. Okay. If anyone is having issues seeing my screen, just shoot a note to Molly in the messages. So I'm just going to give it just a second here just to make sure everyone can see. Okay. All right. So I wanted to just start off by thanking everyone for joining us today for what is the second installment of our FCCS webinar series. If you happen to miss that first one, be sure to check it out, the recording. You can find that on our website. Today, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the inner workings of FCCS, expanding on how the balance sheet rolls as well as FX impact. Since there may be some people on the webinar that have not seen our first installment, I want to just give a very brief recap of that session so that we're all on the same page. As Molly mentioned, the tool we will be covering today is Oracle's Financial Consolidation and Close Cloud, or FCCS. And this is a software as a service model, a cloud tool. And it provides a comprehensive suite of functionality for the monthly close. So that's going to be a consolidations application, along with a close manager and even a supplemental data manager. But unlike many other consolidations tools, including Oracle's own on-prem offering, FCCS comes with a lot of out-of-the-box calculations and functionality to really help cut down on the need for customization and scripting. Some of the most important out-of-the-box features and the focus of our last webinar centers around helping to facilitate the cash flow calculation and reporting. And to recap that, FCCS really helps to make that cash flow process less manual, less custom, and less complex to really be more metadata-driven and push-button. And the magic of all this really hinges on the out-of-the-box movements dimension, along with its preceded dimensionality and calculations. So to review, the movements dimension is used to help analyze the roll forwards of your balance sheet, so going from opening balance to closing balance, as well as build out the cash flow statement itself. On the screen here, we can see the view of the movements dimension that an administrator might interact with, and any members that you see with a FCCS underscore prefix are ones that are preceded. You can see that there's 4 main hierarchies: movements, closing balance variance, cash flow, and cash change. I'm not going to go into all of these, but let's just get a quick reminder of what the movement section looks like. What this section really does is to help provide a walk from the opening balance, which is calculated automatically, and we're going to go into in detail here shortly. Then you take all of the monthly movements in the account balances, for instance, the changes in accounts receivable, plus FX, if you have a multi-currency application, and something that Will is going to review later to get you to your closing balance. So moving on, you can see that under the cash flow parent is our cash flow statement itself. We covered this in our last presentation, but having the cash flow statement in a separate dimension from your accounts provides some really huge benefits in the way of traceability and auditability of what makes up each and every one of those cash flow lines. In FCCS, the cash flow statement is created by taking the movement members from above and adding them as shared members under the specific cash flow line, as you can see here with cash flow from accounts receivable. All right, so now that we've quickly recapped what we went over last time, we can move on to the first topic for today's session. One thing that we find many clients and new users struggle with FCCS are how some of those out-of-the-box calculations work, one of which in particular is how the balance sheet rolls from period to period. And before we get into the detail, I want to provide a little bit of background on FCCS that'll help set the stage for this discussion. By its nature, FCCS calculates and functions as a periodic application. And what this really means is that for individual months, January, February, and so on, the movements on the balance sheet represent the monthly change for that month only, rather than the year-to-date change in the balance from the prior year. But even though it acts as a periodic application, FCCS does have a mechanism to allow you to input data on a year-to-date or life-to-date basis if you choose, and then automatically calculate that periodic value from that. And in addition, it then enables you to see the data in different formats using its out-of-the-box view dimension, which might be familiar to any of our HFM users out there. So using the view dimension, you can easily see your data in either periodic, year-to-date, quarter-to-date, or even half year-to-date if your application includes half years. So automatically, the system will calculate the opening balance member in the movements as the closing balance from the prior relevant period. And you'll see soon why I use the term relevant here, but let's get into it and see this in action. Just a quick housekeeping note here that just to make it a little bit easier to follow the flow of data, we're going to use screenshots from our application rather than a live demo. But if anyone on the line would like to see it in action, don't hesitate to reach out and we can go through it live on a separate session. Okay. So for our example, we're going to be looking at a data form, which is displaying accounts receivable for a single entity. I'm going to step through my examples for both periodic, which is at the top of the screen, and remember is how the application functions, but also year to date, which is how many people will be viewing this data, and it's at the bottom of the screen. In the rows, we start with closing balance, then opening balance, and the total movements change. In our first column is the December 2017 data, which is our starting point. You can see that for December 17, we just have an opening balance of $12,501, which then sums up to the closing balance. Then in the next column, we have data for the full year 2018 and the ability to expand the periods. So in the example, you can see that for the full year 2018, the results at either year-to-date or periodic are the same, since the ending result should represent the life-to-date balance of the account at closing, with the movements being the total movements for that year. Okay. Next, let's start to look at how the data flows when we go into the month. And we can start by looking at January, which is really the easiest month of the year because the periodic and year-to-date values will be the same. For both periodic and year-to-date, we can see that the closing balance from December of the prior year automatically becomes the opening balance in January. In both cases, we also have a movement in accounts receivable of $15,205, resulting in a closing balance of $27,709. Okay, so let's now move on to February, and this is where things start to diverge a little bit. From the periodic view, the closing balance of January then rolls forward and becomes the opening balance in February. Now, this is something that's much different than the typical consolidation system. But if we look at the bottom of the screen for year-to-date, the February opening balance is still being pulled from December of the prior year. Now, switching back to periodic, the February movement of $795 would represent the change in accounts receivable in the month of February only, whereas in the year-to-date view, the movement of $16,000 in February is the sum of the periodic movement from January and February. So $15,205 plus $795 gets us to the $16,000 movement. As you can see, once again, we get to the same place for closing balance with $28,504, since that's the life-to-date balance of accounts receivable in February, but it also allows us to see the movements in either a periodic or a year-to-date format. All right, so let's just take this 1 month forward to really drive the point home. In March, at the periodic view, the opening balance is the closing balance of February, but in year-to-date, that opening balance once again is still coming from the closing balance in December. And again, for the movements, the periodic view of $1,560 would represent the change in AR for March, and the year-to-date view of $17,560 is the sum of the January, February, and March movements. Once again, with both arriving to the same closing balance of $30,064. Now, if we were to continue this exercise each and every month, they would all function in the same fashion, but I'm not going to bore you by going through each and every one of them. However, let's take a look at how the data behaves at the quarter level. If you recall from a few minutes ago, I referred to the opening balance coming from the prior relevant period, and this is really where it starts to come to light. The easiest example of this is Q1, because much like January, the year-to-date and periodic views produce the same result. In both cases, opening balance at Q1 becomes the closing balance from the prior December, or in reality, it comes from the Q4 2017 value, because that's the prior quarter to 2018 quarter one. In both cases, the movements represent the sum of the movements from January through March, and both have the same closing balance of $30,064. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, we can start to look at quarter two, which is where things start to get interesting. For the periodic view, the opening balance comes from the closing balance of quarter one, which again is the prior relevant period. In contrast, for year-to-date, much like the months, the opening balance is again coming from the closing balance of December 2017. Going back to our movements, the periodic value at Q2 is the sum of April through June only, or negative 1,780 plus 650 plus 1,380 to get you to a total for Q2 movements of 250. But for year-to-date, what that movement represents at Q2 is the total movement from January through June, which gives us a total of 17,810. But once again, in both cases, we get to that same closing balance of 30,314. And this behavior is something that you could see then across quarters 3 and 4 as well. So if we round things back out and come full circle to year total, you can see again that for the full year, you get the same result at either periodic or year to date, because that's what you're getting to for the full year results. So going through this example, hopefully you have a little bit better idea of how those beginning balances are generated using the out-of-the-box functionality. In these examples, I focused on periodic and year-to-date. However, the same principles would apply to either quarter-to-date or half-year-to-date as well, where the opening balance is going to be coming from the prior relevant period. Viewed here, what this really allows you to do, after seeing this, the real power of this approach is that since the cash flow statement is built using the movements, and those movements are periodic, it allows us to easily generate a year-to-date or periodic cash flow statement with zero extra customization. Viewed here, you can seamlessly toggle between a periodic or year-to-date view of your cash flow. This allows you to easily generate a cash flow statement for individual months or even individual quarters without any extra work. But so far in this webinar series, we've really been simplifying things down by looking at data in only local currency terms. So the next part of this session, we're going to ramp things up a little bit. Another area that we see some of our clients struggle in their consolidation systems is calculating and understanding the FX impact on their balance sheet account. This is, again, something that's delivered out of the box with FCCS without any custom scripting. And as you'll see, this also benefits from this periodic nature of calculation in the application. So at this point, I'm going to pass things over to Will for the second topic of the day and introduce FX into the mix.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. Let me just share my screen here. And again, if anybody's having issues seeing the screen, please feel free to send Molly a message in Zoom, and we can get that fixed for you. So for the second half of this webinar, we're going to discuss the FX impact on all balance sheet accounts and how it is calculated out of the box in FCCS. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. Normally when FX is mentioned, the response is Bueller, Bueller, and that's very normal. But after this, I promise you there will not be any radio silence when it comes to FX. So before we get into calculating FX and FCCS, let's first discuss currency translation. Currency translation converts data from one currency to another. You can translate data from the entity's input currency to any other reporting currency that has been defined in the application. When you consolidate data, currency translation occurs if the parent entity has a different default currency than its child entities. Now, all accounts within the balance sheet grouping FCCS_balance sheet, which is an FCCS predefined balance sheet hierarchy, are translated, and the default translation is based on the default translation settings. So when the application is first created, the system defaults to the following settings. For a balance account, which are beginning or ending balances on the balance sheet, the translation method is periodic, and the rate account is the ending or end of month rate. For flow accounts, which are income statement or P&L accounts, as well as balance sheet movements, the translation method is again periodic. However, the rate account is the average monthly rate. So here you will see a screenshot from the system of those default translation methods. The user does have the ability to change these default settings as they see fit. And just one important note before we go forward, in this webinar, we are looking at generic examples, but the tool also comes with the ability to do currency overrides with multiple currencies using either balances or rates, and this is all out of the box with FCCS. So if you remember back to last webinar and even earlier in this webinar, FX is housed in the movement dimension under the movements hierarchy. The member FCCS_movements_FX_total is the total effect from foreign exchange, and it is comprised of two members: foreign exchange on opening balances and foreign exchange on movements. As we will see shortly, these foreign exchange variances are calculated to bring the aggregated closing balance to the equivalent of the untranslated closing balance translated at the end of month rate. In a lot simpler terms, this is the local currency multiplied by the end of month rate. And I promise you this will make a lot more sense in a bit when we walk through our example. So both FX on opening balance and FX on movements are calculated on all accounts. So to really understand how this works, let's take a look at a comprehensive example of how the total FX effect, FX on opening balance, and FX on movement are all calculated out of the box in FCCS. Here you see a smart view poll of the Europe entity at both entity currency, which is the euro, and parent currency, which is USD. For simplicity, we have focused in on one balance sheet account, trade accounts receivable. So as we mentioned earlier, the calculation is the same for all accounts within the balance sheet grouping FCCS_balance sheet. If you look closely, you will see all the same movement members for both entity currency and parent currency, except for the total effect from foreign exchange and its children of FX on opening and FX on movement. This is expected as these members would only be calculated when there is a translation from entity currency to parent currency. If both entity and parent currency were the same, no translation would occur upon consolidation. So now let's get into actually calculating FX. The first step in determining the FX impact on a balance sheet account is the translation of the beginning balance from local currency to parent or reporting currency. This step takes the beginning balance at local currency or entity currency and multiplies it by the end of month rate from the prior period. The purpose of this is that the system wants to lock the beginning balance at the end of month rate from the prior period to make sure that the opening balance ties to the closing balance from the prior period. So in our example, the local currency opening balance is $37,887. As Andrew mentioned earlier, FCCS is by nature a periodic application. So this opening balance is the closing balance from the prior relative period. Since we are looking at January here, the prior relative period is December. So we will translate this opening balance by the end of month rate from December, which is 1.199861. This will give us our translated opening balance of $45,459. After we translate the opening balance, the next step is to translate the movement for the period from local to reporting currency. In this step, we will take the movement during the period and multiply it by the average rate from the same period. And in both instances, we are talking about the current period. Again, FCCS is a periodic application, so the movements on the balance sheet for the period represent the monthly changes. In our example, since we are in January, the movement represents all transactions from this account in January. If we were looking at February, this would only be the movements from February 1st to February 28th or 29th if it's a leap year, rather than the aggregate of both January and February. Now, since movement is a flow account and considered to be spread throughout the period, we want to use the average rate to translate the amount to the parent or reporting currency. And as we saw earlier, the default settings for a flow account are already set to average rate. So going back to our example, the entity currency movement for January is 46,071, and this amount will be translated using the January average rate of 1.218579, getting us to our parent currency movement of 56,141. Now, after we have translated both the opening balance and movements for all balance sheet accounts, it is now time to calculate both the FX on opening balance and FX on movement. So to start, we'll calculate the FX on opening balance. For this calculation, we will take the local currency opening balance in January and multiply it by the difference between the end of month rates. Earlier, we had mentioned that we translate opening balance at the prior period end of month rate to lock in the opening balance and have it tied to the closing balance from the period before. But really, this is a new period, and the rate may have changed, causing our beginning balances to shift. This calculation is used to determine the change in the opening balance due to exchange rate fluctuations. If we look at our example, the opening balance in local currency is 37,887. This will be multiplied by the difference between the January end of month rate of 1.242907 and the December end of month rate of 1.199861. This gets us to our FX on opening balance of 1,631. The next piece in the FX puzzle is the calculation of FX on movements. In order to calculate this, we need to take the January movement at local currency and multiply it by the difference between the end of month rate for the current period and the average rate for the current period. When we translated the movement, we used the average rate for the period since this movement is a flow. Using the average rate, we're assuming that the movements are spread out equally throughout the period. This calculation is determining the difference if we had booked all movements at the end of month. So when looking at our example, the local currency movement for January is 46,071. This amount will be multiplied by the difference between January end of month rate of 1.242907 and the January average rate of 1.218579. This gets us to our FX on movements of $1,121. Now that both FX on opening balance and FX on movements have been calculated, it's now time to calculate the total effect from foreign exchange. This is a very simple calculation, as all we need to do is aggregate both the FX on opening balance and FX on movements. In our example, the total FX impact is 2,752, which is the summation of 1,631, our FX on opening balance, and 1,121, our FX on movements. So we've calculated FX. What's next? Next, we need to calculate the closing balance for the current period. The closing balance is simply the translated opening balance plus or minus the translated movements plus or minus the total FX impact. As we have already calculated all of these pieces individually, this is a simple aggregation exercise. So going back to our example, the closing balance is the sum of the opening balance, which is 45,459, plus the movements of 56,141, plus the total effect from foreign exchange of 2,752. This gets us to a January closing balance of 104,352. Now, to check that this calculated closing balance is correct, we can take the closing balance at entity currency and multiply it by the current period's end of month rate. In our example, this is the 83,958 opening balance, which is the sum of the local currency opening balance plus the movements, translated at the January end of month rate, which is 1.242907. This gets us to a translated closing balance of 104,352, which equals our calculated balance from earlier. So with that, we have demystified the FX impact on all balance sheet accounts with automatic calculation in FCCS. Hopefully now you won't need to skip your next meeting when FX is the topic. And with that, I will turn it back to Molly to conclude our webinar.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our webinar. We will have a recording of the webinar ready shortly, which will be available on platformspecialist.com as well as LinkedIn. You'll also be receiving a note from me after the webinar to schedule your own demo of FCCS with us and to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have following the webinar. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and look forward to having you join the final session of the FCCS Cash Flow Series on December 20th. So save the date. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.